All right. Good morning, Doug. We're back. We've got Trump's new plan to make America great again. We'll get into that in some detail. But first, this day in history. What happened today?
The arbitrator of intellectual soundness in the past, the Encyclopedia Britannica, uh, exhibits further proof of how degraded it and the intellectual environment has generally become. Of all the things that have happened this day in history, number one, the featured biography, is the birth of Halle Berry. Nothing against Halle Berry, fine actress, but of all the important people born in history, some pop stars, some actress, and of course, historically, actresses have been just one step above prostitutes. Maybe they still are. Uh, I don't think she should be there, quite frankly. Other events of the day, uh, to fill space, they've taken two sports figures, nothing against Magic Johnson or Usain Bolt, but these are sports figures. They're like actresses. These are
Because
not world-altering important. So why are they doing this? Who are they catering to?
we're in an entertainment economy, Doug.
Yes, we are. It's not a serious economy at all. Uh, the first thing that they come up that might pass as being serious is the Cologne Cathedral was completed. And they started the Cologne Cathedral in the Middle Ages and finally completed it in 1880. That's kind of interesting. Shows some long-term planning on the part of the Germans before they decided to become professional warriors. Interestingly, when I was in Cologne as a student uh, in the late 60s, uh, it was obvious that the bombing of Cologne by the Americans, the cathedral was about the only thing in that part of town that wasn't hit. Was it by accident or was it intentional? Well, the Americans said it was missing it intentionally, but I don't know, for what it's worth.
We
But
didn't
no,
have precision bombing then, though. I mean, it'd be dumb luck to miss it, wouldn't it?
I suppose, but how precision were bombs dropped on German cities in World War II? I mean, these were dumb bombs. And well, anyway, it's just a interesting throwaway. The first thing that they mention here that has some intellectual interest is that in 2004, there was a Polish-born poet, essayist, and critic named Czesław Milosz. He was considered one of the major poets of the 20th century. Considered by who? Frankly, who gives a damn about poets? They're mostly left-wing poofters, frankly. Uh, I generally despise poets, but he won the 1980 Nobel Prize for Literature. And my view of poetry is that it actually wouldn't exist except for a few really good lines by a few really good poets that are worth repeating. Most of them are by Shakespeare, but good poetry today, insofar as it exists, is in songs, and not even songs written today, which is mostly rap and hip hop, which is, you can't dignify any of that with poetry. But you listen to a lot of popular songs, and it's poetry set to lyrics, and that's an old tradition. Uh, set to music, I should say. It started with Homer. People don't realize if they read the Iliad or the Odyssey, that those poems were sung, actually, to the accompaniment of a lyre, and we don't know, but probably another instrument or two. So insofar as poetry is interesting, I think it's to be found in rock and roll songs of the not so distant past. Just an observation.
Well, I did find a couple of other things that I'm surprised weren't on the list, but 1945, Japan surrendered, which ended World War II. That
Kind
was
of an
August
important
14th,
event. You'd think they might have listed that more prominently.
I would think. And I think almost as significant as that event was 1935 Social Security Act was signed into law by FDR.
Yeah, FDR. Who are the worst? Everybody's making up these lists or has made up lists. The worst presidents in history, uh, or the best presidents in history. And George Washington often makes it. FDR always makes it. But I would say he's in the competition for being the worst president in American history, along with, I know I'll shock people by saying it, but I've said it before, Abraham Lincoln, uh, Calvin Coolidge, Lyndon Johnson. But FDR actually cemented the welfare state into the American tradition with everything he did, including creating Social Security, which has long been nothing but an illegitimate Ponzi scheme, but it's going to go bust and help to destroy the whole financial fabric of the U.S., but they'll still love him.
Well, it's like FDR was the presiding authority over America's last Great Reset.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. Well, what are you going to do? He established this tradition, which is still building. I'd like to see it washed away, but we'll get into what Trump is going to do to
Yeah.
rectify or not some of his mistakes. The last thing I've got here from the Encyclopedia Britannica, last on its list, front page, is that Pakistan became a sovereign state belonging to the ending British rule there. And a lot of people don't realize that when Pakistan separated from India, they had really a civil war as Mohammedans moved out of India proper and Hindus moved from what used to be Pakistan into India. There were about 2 million people that died violent deaths during the birth of Pakistan. That's a shocking number.
Wow. That's insane.
So it is insane. And I'm of the opinion that Pakistan is going to come to a kind of a sad ending anyway. But there we have it. Now, happier things, how Trump
Yeah.
is going to make
Yeah,
America.
let's talk about the game plan for how we change everything, how we roll the tide of socialism and statism back and get America back to freedom.
I'm sure that the Donald has come up with a rational, workable, and reasonable uh, laundry list of things that he'll do once he's in office, if he's in office, in 3 months. So what do we got on this list? 20 things. The first one, seal the border and stop the migrant invasion. Okay, stop the migrant invasion. I don't know about sealing the border. Would that seal us in as well as sealing them out? I don't know. But you do have to stop the migrant invasion. I think he can do that, probably.
Kill the incentives. That's a good start.
Oh, nobody ever thinks about that. If they stopped subsidizing all these migrants, giving them free credit cards, giving them places to stay, free food, free medical, putting their kids into school immediately, yeah, the attractant would go away. I mean, there wasn't a problem with an invasion in the US of alien people during the 19th century. The Irish and the Italians and the Poles and the Jews all kind of shared the same culture as America. And when they got here, they got nothing, absolutely nothing, and had to make their way. And they all succeeded. But of course, these migrants are drawn in actively and given lots of stuff. So no wonder we have a crime rate from these people.
It's outrageous. So what's the second thing on his list?
Well, carry out the largest deportation operation in American history. And my question was the largest deportation in American history. I was unaware of a previous deportation operation, but you looked it up.
There was one. It's very even its name was is certainly now politically correct. It was done during the Eisenhower administration in 1954. It was called Operation Wetback, and it was a massive deportation operation targeting Mexican immigrants to the U.S. And they claim that they removed 1 million Mexican immigrants in that at that time.
I know you're not supposed to call Mexicans wetbacks anymore, but uh, I went to school, high school, and there were a few Mexicans. There was a boarding military school, so they're all wealthy upper class Mexicans. But we all used to make jokes calling them wetbacks. I don't think anybody dares call a Mexican a wetback anymore. And to think that was an operation that the US government sponsored way back when. So we'll see how this works out.
Yeah.
Number three, end inflation and make America affordable again. Well, this is completely intellectually dishonest, and it's not going to happen. Trump spent more money, ran up bigger deficits, was more monetarily promiscuous than Biden was. Most people haven't looked at the numbers, and those are the facts. So how's he going to end inflation if his whole history is printing up more money? How's that going to happen? How do you end inflation? The only way I can think of ending it, well, it helps when you deregulate and so forth, of course. There's more production. But he's not going to stop printing up money. He wants to do stuff.
Right. I mean, there's no way to do, I mean, with our deficits the way they are, with the debt the way we have it, with all of the the transfer payments that occur, Social Security, for instance. I mean, there's just no way to keep these things going without printing money. Printing money causes inflation.
Exactly. So it's duplicitous and intellectually dishonest of the Trumpies to say that he's going to end inflation. That's a fraud. I think we're too far gone. The only way inflation is going to be ended in this country is truly radical surgery, perhaps with a deflationary credit collapse as a starter to end it. Anyway, that's not going to happen. Ending inflation, that is. 4, make America the dominant energy producer in the world by far. That's doable.
In fact, the U.S. hit an all-time record last week, 13.4 million barrels per day last week.
But you know what I don't like about that, what he's got here, number 4? He's not going to make America the dominant energy producer. All he has to do is get out of the way and allow America to become the greatest energy producer. So it's really bad when he cements the idea that the president can make it happen. No, he can't. He can just allow it to happen, and it would happen if the government gets out of the way.
Well,
So
and by his theory, in fact, Biden has made America the world's #1 energy producer.
that's right. It's happened during Biden's term. That's an interesting point to draw to people's attention. A very obvious and good point. Number 5, stop outsourcing and turn the United States into a manufacturing superpower. Well, how is he going to stop outsourcing? Is he going to give orders to companies that make things outside of the country and tell them to stop doing it? I mean, what is this? Is he going to become an economic dictator to enforce the things he likes? I mean, maybe it's a good idea if Americans would build things at home. I think it is. But the government can't stop outsourcing. You know, if they don't want people to outsource and build things abroad, I'll tell you how you do it. You don't need Washington to make it happen. All you have to do is make the environment in the US felicitous for making things here. Reduce regulations, reduce taxes, stop coddling unions. That's all you have to do. It's not make anything happen. That's crazy. Just get
This
rid of
point,
the impediments.
at this point, it seems almost it's a long road back because because all the manufacturing, so much of it is done in China. Even the things that America claims that's manufactured in the U.S. is like finished in the U.S., assembled in the U.S., or has fundamental key components, or at least requires steel or graphite or something else from China. I mean, it's. I don't think people even understand how hard it would be to return the U.S. to the dominance it had at one point in manufacturing, where it owned the supply chains and the finishing process with just refining metals. Even it's just all gone now.
It is, in addition to the fact that wholesale getting rid of all the impediments to manufacturing that drove it out of the country to start with, that's really not going to happen. And the average American would rather collect welfare and food stamps
And go to Walmart and buy the cheap stuff they get from China.
exactly. So it's a nice idea, but well, it's a stupid idea that he can stop outsourcing or should even try in the way he's talking about it. Number 6, large tax cuts for workers and no tax on tips. Well, okay, large tax. How about large tax cuts for everybody? How about no tax? How about no income taxes and abolish the IRS? That's an idea. But you can't do that unless you radically cut everything that the US government does. So it doesn't need the money.
Yeah.
Why do waiters and bartenders and people like that, why do they get a break on not having to tax their income and we don't?
Yeah, if that hopefully there's enough loopholes in that law that everybody could start working on a super low hourly wage plus tips from now on.
Yeah.
I'll take
It,
tips instead.
in order to make sure that nobody skates on this, well, we'll probably have to, well, we'll find some reason, we'll find lots of employment for those 80,000 new IRS agents that they're hiring now. It doesn't talk about firing them, though, oddly. Anyway, number 7. So this is creating more distortions in the way people work and are compensated and so forth. Number 7, defend our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, our fundamental freedoms, freedom of speech, religion, blah, 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 blah. That's a good idea. Except I would say that the Constitution is actually mostly a dead letter now, because it's been so selectively interpreted. And anyway, it's nice. I think it's a good thought.
But it was under his administration they pushed through that bump stock ban. People seem to forget that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Where was his veto when it was needed on that? Well, the problem, of course, is that Donald has, nice intentions, I think, most of the time, but he has no philosophical core. So what he does is going to be unreliable. Anyway, defend our Constitution, what's left of it. Okay, can't argue with that. 8, prevent World War III. Oh, that's a good idea. Restore peace in Europe. And, well, that shouldn't be too hard to do. How about just keep your nose out of other people's business? Because actually, if World War III happens, I think that the US is going to be in back of it, whether it's in the Middle East or the Ukraine or in Taiwan, which is the third.
Well, the Middle East can't happen without the Third World War doesn't seem to me that it could possibly occur without the US as a primary belligerent. So all you got to do is just don't do anything, stay away, don't finance it, don't arm anybody, don't put our troops there, don't do any of that. And then it won't happen.
Absolutely not. Absolutely, that's quite correct. It would be, a dust up, a border war between the Ruskies and the Ukrainians. Sorry about that, but it's their business. And too bad for the Israelis, or too bad for the Palestinians, but not our problem. But yeah, is he going to butt out of any of those things? I doubt it. How's he going to prevent World War III unless he does that? Which he probably won't. 9, end the weaponization of government against the American people. That's a great idea.
That one, I like that. That seems like, yeah.
Can't argue with that. 10, stop the migrant crime epidemic, demolish foreign drug cartels, crush gang violence, and lock up violent offenders. Well, okay. Yeah. What do you think?
I mean, obviously, we shouldn't have criminals running around, being able to do what's happening right now. The thing that I don't like about this is that he's talked about basically sending in SEALs and doing drone bombings, missile strikes in Mexico in order to stop this. That's where I worry that that's going too far.
Yeah, that is going too far. And when he talks about demolishing foreign drug cartels, that is totally impossible to do as long as drugs are illegal. Because as long as they're illegal, the prices are going to be very high as they were during Prohibition for alcohol. We created the mafia with Prohibition, and these drug cartels have been created with drug prohibition. So you're not going to demolish the foreign drug cartels. You're just going to start another war against them, but they're not going to go away. In fact, the more successful you are and the higher you drive the price of drugs, the more people it'll suck into the business to take advantage of the profits available.
And it's hard to imagine that our intel services aren't somehow connected to I mean, there've been many demonstrated connections between our intel services and, drug trafficking in the past. I have to imagine if we really were trying to stop them, we could. And I think that there's a part of our government, that has an interest in it continuing, and that's why it happens this way.
Yeah, exactly. I've got to believe there are a lot of DEA agents and FBI agents and agents from lots of these other Praetorian agencies that walk away quite wealthy because the industry that they're regulating is very wealthy, and a little bit of that rubs off. Anyway, that's not going to work. 11, rebuild our cities, including Washington, D.C., making them safe, clean, and beautiful again. Well, how is the government going to rebuild our cities? Where are they going to get the money? Who's going to do that? What parts of the cities? How's the government go about rebuilding our cities? I thought our cities were all built by entrepreneurs and people that lived in the houses and worked in the buildings. And the government shouldn't rebuild our cities. That's crazy, it seems to me.
Agree.
Including Washington, D.C. I'd like to see Washington, D.C. not rebuilt, but turned into a ghost town, quite frankly. Number 12, strengthen and modernize our military, making it without question the strongest and most powerful in the world. Well, that's kind of interesting. It's the most expensive in the world by an order of magnitude, almost. But strengthen and modernize it further with more expensive weapons.
For what purpose? For what purpose? So we can continue our, the hegemon, as the hegemon's been around for a while. I mean, for defense purposes, I get it. You should be able to defend the borders and all that stuff and make sure we're protected from invasion, although the oceans do a good job of that for the most part so far. It just seems like if you got this big bad tool, you'll have the same instincts, or some people will, to use it in various parts of the world to intervene, which is what we've been doing for a long time.
Yeah, and if he's going to strengthen and modernize the military, I guess that means spending lots more money on all kinds of grossly overpriced weapons. I mean, a good step might be to close the 800 bases, which are basically we have around the world, which are basically antagonizing the natives and acting as a tripwire. So it sounds good, but it's not a good idea. Uh, 13, keep the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. Well, how's he going to do that?
With the military. See the previous item, I think.
Of course. It's logical that that would come right after the military. No thoughts of once again, people forget that the major export of the US is not soybeans or Boeings, it's dollars. And there's scores of trillions of the damn things abroad that are hot potatoes that'll be dumped at some point because they rest on nothing but confidence on the part of the foreigners that own it. And confidence can blow away like a pile of feathers in a hurricane. So that's going to fail because he's not going to do, cannot, will not do any of the fundamentals for it to remain as a, where everybody wants to get rid of the dollar with good reason. Can't keep it. How's he do that? Well, you said the military. 14, fight for and protect Social Security and Medicare with no cuts, including no changes to the retirement age. I mean, he's just further reinforcing the welfare state in the US. My suggestion would be to abandon Social Security, distribute what looks like its remaining assets to people that are overage, and tell younger people, hey, save for your retirement. How about a little bit of personal responsibility? The government ain't going to do it. And same with Medicare. And of course, he doesn't even mention Medicaid, which may be bigger than Medicare at this point. I can't remember.
I don't know anyone in my generation that expects Social Security to be around when they retire. So, I mean, just a simple thing is you say for people born after 1980, sorry, it doesn't exist, or 19 whatever. And then just like stop it. It's a reality. It's not going to be there instead of keeping up this fantasy. And it just guarantees that his other financial plans won't work if you won't, you know, you're not going to attack these you know, these transfer payments, the welfare programs through Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare, and you think the military needs to get bigger. Well, what's left in the budget?
Yeah. Number 14, like most of these things, I'm sorry to say, is dishonest and frankly a lie. Can't happen. Won't happen for sure. Number 15, cancel the electric vehicle mandate and cut costly. All right. Absolutely. There shouldn't be any mandates. So that's a good one. 16, cut federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, radical gender ideology, or other inappropriate racial, sexual, political content. Well, good idea, but wait a minute, I got a question. The federal government shouldn't have anything to do with the schools to start with. They've traditionally been a local government function. So he should cut all federal funding for all schools and abolish the Department of Education. But he's not talking about that. He's just going to trim around the edges.
Yep.
Big
And gonna
mistake.
use, as everybody does, the carrot and stick of funding in order to try and shape what, you know, from the federal government, what gets done and where. And this is the problem that got us into this. Is what got us into this trap. It's this.
Yep.
I hate it.
The only way you can solve this problem is getting rid of the Department of Education, getting the federal government totally, absolutely out of all schools, from kindergarten to colleges and post-grad. End of story, period. It's not going to happen though. And he's not trying to make it happen. 17, keep men out of women's sports. Well, that's a good idea, but is this the federal government's business? I don't know.
It seems like this is something pretty easy to, this is partially caused by the federal government because they basically have, they started to put transgender people under Title IX protections, which is a very broad protection for funding to the universities. So this is where it really originates from. So again, the federal funding is the problem. And then all you got to do eventually, these organizations, just like the Olympics, is going to be so shamed by the, the boxing stuff that happened, that if that they'll self-correct. And obviously the Olympics aren't really an organic, they're a state creature too. But there's not, like, you don't see this happening in the UFC today. Why? Because that private organization that feels it's totally inappropriate to put, a man and a woman in a cage and have them fight each other. So I think it'd be sorted out by these different groups that already regulate the games.
Yeah, exactly. If the USC wants to allow men to fight in the women's division, well, that's their business. It's none of the government's business. It's because of, like you said, Title IX that opened the gate to this kind of nonsense. But you don't have to keep men out of women's sports. I mean, the government created the problem to start with. 18, deport pro-Hamas radicals and make our college campuses safe and patriotic again. Well, of course, I'm a non-believer in colleges, which have become leftist indoctrination stations to start with. And deport pro-Hamas radicals.
Well, what makes them a radical? Is it that they're pro-Hamas, or is it that they're engaging in violence?
I don't know. Is it the fact that they're Muslims that that are serious about their religion, which is encompassing in all aspects of areas of life? And why does the government have anything to do with this?
Especially if he talks about earlier, he's going to strengthen the Bill of Rights, right? Free speech, all that stuff. And then here he's like, now again, if these are actual violent people who are here on some visa, I totally get it. They should be kicked out. I mean, I think that's behave well while you're here as our guest, or you leave. I like that.
That's
But
a good idea, yeah.
people
And
speaking out because they don't like that, that seems and being, you have to be, it has to be safe and patriotic again. That seems like controlling speech, where you got to be patriotic.
yeah, and who defines really what patriotic is? This is all dangerous stupidity. It's up to the college to do this, and if people commit crimes on campus, then they should have to pay the penalty for committing a crime. So this is all blather. 19, secure our elections, including same-day voting, voter ID, paper ballots. Okay, that sounds pretty good to me. What do you think?
I mean, there's, yeah, no argument with that. Other people, other countries, France, for instance, they tried the not using voting machines instead of paper ballots. Yeah, they switched back. They get it all counted in a day. You have to be authorized to vote because by being a citizen. I mean, these things are, it's such a no-brainer. This should have been at the top of his list, honestly. It was or one of the first few, because it's, who could argue with this? If you argue with it, there's a problem, I think.
Yeah, it should be one day. If you care enough to vote, be where the vote can be taken. It's on paper, so it can be verified. Voter ID, proof of citizenship. Fine. That's what you got to do if you want to vote. Good idea. Okay, that's fine. 20, unite our country by bringing it into a new and record level of success. Actually, uniting a country, especially if it's 330 million people, because I'm not even sure we're a country anymore. We're more like a more like a multicultural domestic empire at this point. It's going to be hard to unite it. How are you going to unite, the 300,000 Somali migrants in Minnesota with the rest of, and the millions of new, way you're going to deport them? I'm not sure.
Or even just people from where I am, and from in Iowa, compared to your typical New Yorker. They just have different values.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure uniting the country in exactly what direction, and who determines what that direction is once you united it. It's dangerous. what we want to do is make the government less an influence in life, because the government is coercion and force. What made America great was not having a federal government that could do these things, but just making it possible to have a free country where you controlled your own life. So bringing
Well,
in,
it's also by just as a, by bringing it to a new and record level of success. Well, what is success? I think that's what you're talking about, direction. Um, it's so vague. It's actually, I mean, it's useless, this whole idea, but if you look a little deeper, it seems dangerous.
it does. And how can the government bring it to new and record levels of success? If you want success, just allow the people to do it. You don't have the government forcing and bringing. I mean, that's crazy. What are we going to set up a new works progress administration in order
Or a
to
new war, where the
unite
country can be not
people?
united in success.
Absolutely. You start a war that will unite the country, or at least most of the country. Okay, so whoever put these 20 points together for the Donald didn't think things out very well. That's my thought.
I think it also just shows where if this is, I'm sure this is focus grouped or thought through by intelligent people, and they must realize that they're basically communicating very simple messages that might cause an emotional response in people, but there's no thought to it. There's no understanding of cause and effect. It's just not there.
And as always, I do like to look at the bright side. And the bright side is that as disappointing as this list of 20 things are, they're a vast improvement over what Kamala and that nincompoop that's her VP will try to push through if they're elected, God forbid.
That's
So,
true. No doubt about it.
the US is sailing between Scylla and Charybdis at this point. And like Odysseus, I guess we have to veer towards Scylla, where we take significant casualties, but at least the whole ship may not be sucked down in the whirlpool of Charybdis, which it would be, I presume, with Harris. We'll try to turn it into a People's Republic, although she won't call it that, obviously.
No. Yeah, I think you're right. But the problem is that the economic situation, regardless who is in charge, means that the whirlpool is going to suck down the ship at some point, no matter what. The question is timing.
Yeah, and of course, the big question out there is, we're going to have a financial collapse. When will it happen? It could be before the election. And an economic collapse, how's that going to affect the way the voters work? And what about getting sucked into World War III or some other war? There's a lot of variables here that I'm afraid Trump should shit can these 20 things and do better.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there for today, Doug, and we'll be back on Friday with questions and probably the news of the day too. I'm sure there'll be a lot happening, as always, between now and then.
Well, once again, Lenin will prove to be right. There are years when nothing happens and weeks when years happen. And we're living in one of those times. So I don't fear for things to talk about on Friday.
Yeah, I don't think so. All right. Thanks, Doug. Take care.
Thanks, Matt.